Let's just give you as quick a recap as possible of what's happened over the day if you're just tuning in. Effectively, war has erupted. For weeks now, the question has been a matter of when rather than if Russia will invade Ukraine, and that is exactly what's happened. Russia claims this is an act of self-defense. It's not war, it's not an attack. It's a military operation to protect the people of the Donbas region, who they say are under threat from Ukraine. On the other hand, you have reports of loud noises, of attacks in Kyiv. People over there are hiding, going into bomb shelters, and Russian troops have reportedly entered Ukraine through the Belarus region. Heavy shelling and explosion in various parts of Kyiv are being reported. Even heavy fighting from an airport near the Ukrainian capital have also now emerged. Clearly, this has sent the world and global markets into a tizzy. Dalal Street was knocked down pretty bad. The Sensex down over 2,700 points. Wall Street Dow Jones opened 800 points down. A sharp sell-off seen among European indices as well. Crude, meanwhile, at $105 a barrel, at a huge high. Gold jumping up as people are looking for a safe haven. So that's the markets and economy part. But geopolitically, the question is what happens next? So over the last few hours, we've had statements from UK's Boris Johnson, you've had statements from NATO, and they've all condemned these actions in the strongest words possible, but made it clear that they are not sending in the troops. So right now, from Ukraine's point of view, they stand alone against the might of the Russian army. What happens next? What are the alternatives and options of what happens next? We're going to talk about that. I have with me a fantastic panel on this subject, all experts. Nitin Pai, co-founder and director of Takshashila Institution, on the show with me. I'm speaking with Navtej, Sarna, former ambassador of India to the United States, and Ajay Bagga, chairman of Elyments platform and market expert, also joining us on the show. In a little while from now, we'll speak with Dr. Alok Bansal, who is actually speaking with us from Kyiv today. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for speaking with us. Nitin, let me begin by your overview. There seemed to be a sense of ease that the world was lulled into, I would say, before yesterday, that Putin won't actually go in with the heavy artillery and the military, that there will be more talk and not really that much action. Does the West seem unprepared for a response right now?
Thanks, Tamanna. I think the first thing to realize is to understand that we are in a very different world today. The world order is not what it used to be even 15 years ago. So we moved from a world of nation states and a liberal international order where sovereignty was respected to a world where there are spheres of influence. Now, in a world like this, power is very important. Respect for sovereignty is not guaranteed. And as Thucydides said, the strong do what they can, and the weak must suffer what they must. So the use of force, therefore, is not new. I mean, it happened in the South China Sea, where Xi Jinping grabbed massive amounts of maritime territory. China tried to flex its muscles along the Himalayan borders with us, and this has been happening. It's not new. So the fact that Vladimir Putin has done it on such a big scale and in such raw visual terms is what is startling about this. Now, I think after the array of forces which have been, posed on all three sides of Ukraine over the last year, there was very little doubt as to the fact that Mr. Putin will have to escalate. You can't put so many forces across, spend so much of time, effort, and resources, array forces, and then just withdraw them. That's the kind of loss of face which authoritarian leader like Putin just can't suffer. So there had to be some kind of escalation. The question was, what level would that escalation take place, and whether Putin's allies and adversaries would allow that thing to happen. And here I would actually look at China as an important player that failed, because if you remember, Putin visited Xi Jinping just before the Olympics, and there was this wonderful photo opportunity where the two were seen together. And Putin might have drawn more in terms of certitude from that then was necessary and that was warranted, and felt that he has the backing of China. The reverse side of that is China probably did not do enough to persuade him not to escalate beyond this point. So if there has been an escalation today, it's not so much because of what the West did or didn't do, but because people who had influence on Russia, on Vladimir Putin, failed to exert that influence to the extent necessary.
I'm going to ask this very simply. Does he really care what anyone else thinks?
Well, it's...
Does he care? The West has said, we should make this simple because people are watching this and they're trying to understand what's happening. Dr. Bansal, I'm going to come to you in a bit, but I just want to thank you. You're joining us from Kyiv right now. I just want to thank you for being here. And I'll come to you in a bit. But my question, let me take this to Mr. Navtej Sarna. When the question of sanctions arose, the Russian foreign minister said, I don't have a time in memory when we're not under Western sanctions. So they don't care. What is the gun to Putin's head? Will it hurt him if, countries stop importing gas, crude? Is there enough that countries can do to bother him and make him step back and deter him?
Well, probably some of the sanctions will be nothing more than irritation to the Russian bear. Because Russia, rightly, as they say, has lived with sanctions for a long time. It's recovered from what it was in the 90s. The foreign exchange reserves of Russia are something like $630 billion. The energy market is huge and running. And they have counters to a lot of things. For instance, the sanction to cut off the SWIFT network doesn't really bother them. It might delay things because they have a Russian network and a Chinese network to fall back on. So one can't say that sanctions won't hurt. They will hurt, particularly if they are on banning sale or purchase of oil and natural gas. But it will not be decisive in holding back Russia's intentions. And also sanctions are, often double-edged weapons. They also hurt the countries which impose them. The companies of the countries are not very happy with imposing sanctions because they lose buyers in the process. So yes, sanctions is going to be one reaction, but many countries have said they don't want to put boots on the ground. There would be supply of weaponry. I think the UK was planning to announce something today. Biden is going to address the United States people, so he might announce some things. So whether there will be a strengthening of NATO forces and NATO presence in the other adjoining countries, who are frankly going to be very nervous with this development. You have Poland and the Baltics, etc. And there you're going to see a concentration of weaponry, which actually defeats what we've been talking about in the sense of, keep NATO away. Well, NATO is going to come closer, maybe not into Ukraine, certainly, but certainly come closer for a longer period and in a more menacing form than it has been. But I'm sure Putin has taken all that into account. He has thought about this. It's the way it's being done today. It shows it's a lot of thought has gone into it. A lot of planning has gone into it, and clearly it's not emerged yet, but it will emerge. And what is the plan? I mean, there were several scenarios being talked about. Do they just want a corridor from Crimea to the mainland? Do they just want to take the ports of Mariupol or maybe Odessa? Do they landlock Ukraine? But what we are seeing is a pincer movement from the north, south, and the east. And looks like they want to knock out Ukraine's critical infrastructure, the sources of Ukrainian pride, the defense industry, and then maybe, see once they get a diplomatic settlement, just walk off. So it's a very disturbing sort of situation at the moment. And I think everybody needs to get together. You mentioned this, the Prime Minister Modi is to speak to Putin tonight. That's what's coming out on the news. And if he does, I think it's a good thing because we are still one of those countries who can pick up the phone and speak to Putin. And, and that also helps us to show that we are not simply fence sitters or tightrope walkers, but we are actually doing something more.
I wanted to actually come to you on that. of course, we don't know what that conversation would go like, but what do you think needs to be said at this point? Because Putin's approach has very clearly been that anyone who gets in the way will be treated as an enemy. You're with us or against us kind of a outlook is something which is developing on both sides. It's a tricky situation for India, but we're in a situation right now where we can't truly condone in any fashion the invasion of another's territory, isn't it? So what would Modi say?
Well, we are absolutely in a tight spot. I think this is the closest test we've seen of our strategic autonomy policy. This is maybe even testing the limits of our strategic autonomy, because we have very good relations on both sides. If we do not condemn Russia, then the West is not going to like it. And I just don't mean like it in a light sense. I mean, the Indo-US relationship is going to take a few steps back. We're going to lose Europe. We're going to lose what happens in the Indo-Pacific against China. And we're going to lose the opportunity, like tomorrow, if China walks into Taiwan, we won't have people supporting us in the Security Council. Now, that's one side of things. At the same time, if we condemn Russia, we lose an old established friend and relationship who has helped us in very critical times. We lose a Russian veto in the Security Council on issues like Kashmir. So we have a lot, and we drive Russia and China even closer together than they are today, possibly, with Pakistan hanging on to their coattails. So that's, so it's going to be a tight situation, and India will be expected to take a more nuanced stand than simply a balancing stand. We will have to come out in favor of the principle that you cannot walk across international borders because this is a flagrant violation of international law. We will have to balance it by perhaps not condemning Russia by name. And we will have to do things like possibly this phone call today to show that while we are trying, this will buy us space. This will buy us time. That yes, India is okay, they have their concerns, so they are not trying to condemn Russia, but they are useful because they can go and talk to Moscow. So I think we have to create that space for ourselves, like we used to do in the old non-aligned days when we didn't have, but strategic autonomy does not have the moral basis that non-alignment had. So people have less understanding for you. People see it as a military economic construct. So they want you to, take sides. There will be pressure. There will be demands on both sides for us to take their sides. So I frankly, my heart goes out to people making Indian policy today, and but I'm confident that they will try to find the right nuanced way out of it.
Definitely I think a trapeze act, if there ever was one, being played out in the full glare of social media when world leaders tweet out what they think. So you can't really even hide behind diplomatic jargon in readouts. So not easy. Mr. Bagga, I was hearing your comments earlier in the day, because you've been speaking through the day on how markets have been responding, and I recall you speaking at one time and saying that you think Zelensky is going to be replaced and out in a matter of a few days. Do you think this goes only in one direction? End game really for Zelensky? Putin sits exactly where he wants to in Ukraine and everyone just kowtows. What are the next triggers that the markets are looking at?
See, Tamanna, we have been totally blindsided, by the Russians. They have played three-dimensional chess with the world leaders. They have taken over Belarus. They had a puppet in place. They have put in 30,000 army. And they have said they will stay there indefinitely. They went for exercises and the army has stayed on. So they've created one buffer already. This second buffer will be created. I think it might not be days also. It might be a couple of days. They have taken over the airbase 25 kilometers out of Kyiv. So it's falling very fast. I think it goes by very soon. What has blindsided the world is the pace. And how well they were able to disguise it. First, we thought it's the Emperor Putin, and like Peter the Great, Macron has gone to him, Olaf has gone to him, everybody is kowtowing to him. He's made his mark, and he will be satisfied with that. Then we thought he's satisfied with the 2 provinces, 30% of the 2 provinces. Now, then we said, okay, maybe he wants the entire part of the 2 provinces. But overnight, he's launched a full invasion, totally in violation of whatever they said. So you can't take them on their face value. And on China, I would say this is a very strategic move from China. You analyze any sanctions done by the US, China is the beneficiary. You look at who's buying the Iranian oil, who's shutting up their GPS systems mid-seas and transferring oil and taking all the Iranian oil. You look at who's buying the Venezuelan oil, whether directly or through Iran. You look at any sanctions, China is the beneficiary. They have got the pipeline with Russia. Ultimately, what the Chinese generals wrote in the 1990s on the Chinese strategy, apart from claiming big portions of our territory, Vietnamese territory, they claim most of the Russian Far East, right up to Vladivostok. That is the Chinese strategy. So it's not that they are very fast friends, but they are friends by design right now. Everybody is playing everybody. The West has come out very weak. Today, a Russian minister was on one of the channels and he said, yeah, you are going to protect Ukraine the way you protected Afghanistan. So, it has been a Jimmy Carter moment for Biden, and he loses more support. The sanctions will just not work. The sanctions which were put out because of this, West was in this foolish reactive mode, while, Trump was playing strategic arbitrage and he was playing escalation dominance. So he's dominating the entire discourse. He moves the chess piece and the others follow. Instead, they should have gone in with they should have laid out the sanctions. So it shows the sanctions are not going to be strong enough. As Ambassador Saab already mentioned, 640 billion of FX reserves is sitting on the biggest gold. He's got 250 billion in a national fund. 250 billion of a national fund he's built. He's got only 30% debt to GDP. India is at 91%. Most of the West is 200 to 300%, including China is at 300%. So he's undebted. He's got a lot of commodities. Everybody wants to buy those commodities. And 2014, when the sanctions came, they were not strong agriculturally. He has made that change also. And he's quoted as saying, thanks for the sanctions, it made us use our brains. So he's created the Russian internet. He's got his own firewall. He's got his own SWIFT, as Ambassador Saab said. They have their own mechanisms. China is dealing openly with all banned or sanctioned countries. It will deal with Russia. There's no issue. We are caught. Our defense is caught. A very strategic ally who stood with us in 71, who stood by us. But let's play the Turkish game then. Turkey has the S-400s. It is a part of NATO. It has stood its ground. It is time for us to also stand our ground. Easy for me, difficult for policymakers. But we have the best man in the place, in Mr. Jaishankar. I'm sure we'll find a way.
Yeah.
And this is the time we have to play our national interest. It lies in being neutral, equidistant from both.
Yeah, but I mean, on the basic premise of, do you say, all right, it's okay if you think you have good enough reason to walk into your neighbor's territory with your tanks? I mean, that will be a difficult one to push. But I want to come to Dr. Bansal, because we often talk about these situations in abstract terms. This is a man who's actually sitting there, joining us from Kyiv right now. Dr. Bansal, thank you so much for speaking with us live on the show. I can only imagine how stressful this situation will be for you and the Indian community. Can you just give us a sense of what the Indian diaspora is experiencing right now?
Okay, I'll start with the topic. When did it started actually? This war started in 2014, not now. And nobody is helping Ukraine actually. The sanctions are really, it does not matter for Putin, all these sanctions which Europe and America is making. Putin is not afraid of at all. So usually they captured Lugansk and Donetsk districts in 2014. Just 2 days back, he officially declared that these are independent republics. And they made 2 presidents of these 2 districts by himself, okay? So this was just official information. So officially he put all his army through Donetsk and Lugansk And today, unfortunately, we are not lucky in Ukraine, in Kyiv. He started bombarding Ukraine in all over the cities. So he started bombarding all the cities of Ukraine where there are Air Force camps and army camps. There were missiles.
Tell me what it has been for you in Kyiv, what it has been like for you in Kyiv since this morning.
You know, it's a tough day. I get up early in the morning at 5 o'clock due to calls, emergency calls from my family. And of course, but I'm a doctor, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. So I decided to go to my hospital and to serve my patients. I did 4 surgeries today. In such a tension environment, it was difficult for me to operate patients. But still after that, I decided I should serve the people of Ukraine and I should do the surgery. And parallelly, I was getting calls from Embassy of India, from all students, from all my Indian friends, as I'm the head of the diaspora in Ukraine. So this is my duty to help my local people, my Indians.
Do you want to be evacuated, Dr. Bansal? Are there Indians right now who want to be evacuated and, are not sure how the airspaces are closed? Is everyone in a sheltered place?
Yeah, today morning we are working on it. There were 2 flights, one on the today in the morning and one on tomorrow from Kyiv. And there are around 500 students who arrived from different cities of Ukraine. And they are nowhere. They are standing on the railway stations, airport and metro. So together with the help of embassy, we are giving them shelter. We opened a school for them where they are at least they are safe. We people are making food for them. All owners of Indian restaurants, they are making food for them free of cost. All Indian diaspora, business diaspora is helping with money. So we are trying to help our locals, our Indians. Today we have already started arranging the buses from Kyiv to Romania. And on the request of Government of India and Embassy of India, Romania is opening the borders without visa for Indians. And I hope that Air India might fly from Delhi to Romania now to evacuate the students initially. And then, of course, anybody who wants to leave Ukraine among Indians. So,
but you
will
stay. Dr. Bansal, are you
to
going to stay or are you going to leave if you have a chance?
Right now, I'm going to stay because, my wife is local. I've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
My in-laws, they are old. So I want to stay with them. I cannot leave country immediately.
Yeah.
And I want to help my students. I want maximum students should fly back to India because everybody is very much worried in India about their, kids. So I'm trying my best. I hope that they will not start bombarding Kyiv to the people, to the civil people, They are attacking only like right now army bases, but we are very much worried. We are worried. I hope that we'll not get panic in this situation, but still try to control, trying to help Embassy of India. We are providing with buses. Hope that evacuation flights might come to Romania, which is not so far actually from Kyiv. It's around 500, 600 kilometers. We can drive by car, by buses, and reach to Romania.
Sure.
Today I got a call from the consular of Hungary. Personally, they are my friends. That you can come to Hungary, please. You are most welcome to Hungary. But this is not the question of about Dr. Alok. It's about my community in Ukraine. So we have to try to protect everybody, to give shelter, to give food, and everybody should be safe. All Indians should be safe.
Yeah.
So we are praying for peace, and we are requesting the world community, the diplomats, to talk to Putin. And I request Mr. Modi also to talk to Putin. I know it's a very sensitive question about, friendship, but here the war is going on, and Mr. Modi also think about the Indian students and Indian community in Ukraine. We are around 20,000 people. So, it's like, it's like in a film. If you remember Airlift, it's like same.
Well,
Because
I wish you well. I wish you well, Dr. Bansal, and I'm sure we all thank you for the work that you're doing there. Hopefully, all the students will be evacuated safely soon. Thank you so much for that perspective. In fact, Ambassador Sarna, on that point, while we're talking about that tightrope walk diplomatically, and that will go on, this needs to be a priority, isn't it? Bringing Indians out safely.
Yes, I think that's always a top priority in situations of crisis, and we have a very good record, fingers crossed, of doing so. Whether it was Libya or Lebanon and other places, as far back as Iraq, etc. So we've done lots of airlifts, and we've done them We've done them effectively. We've even brought in people of other countries to safety from crisis zones, earthquakes, for instance, the big earthquake in Nepal a few years ago, and several other situations. So I think the ministry, the government of India with the other ministries involved is quite well geared up to these situations and to these, but of course, a lot depends upon the objective factors. A lot, there'll be difficulties. There are already difficulties of open air space. There will be difficulties of finding routes, making sure the aircrafts can land in the right places and all that. But I think this will be high priority. Some students have already come back.
Yes.
And I think this naturally to save your own
while
citizens
we're speaking
is always...
about this, apologies for interrupting. Press briefing is going on by the Ministry of External Affairs. Let's just dip in very quickly and hear what they're saying.
That the number of flights were augmented from about twice a week to about 2 flights a day. And that enabled us to get at least 4,000 of our citizens and students out. We should also remember that there were a number of other options available through flights to Dubai and Istanbul and other places from Kyiv. Our embassy in Ukraine continues to be functional, is rendering all assistance possible to Indian nationals there, notwithstanding the fairly complicated and evolving situation that we find ourselves in. The embassy has issued a number of advisories in recent days. Today itself, the embassy has issued 3 advisories, and these provide advice to Indian nationals on the situation as it evolves, travel towards safer places, including western parts of the country that will facilitate the exit by road and other means, safety precautions that our citizens could take, etc. Our ambassador has also sent a personal message to all Indian citizens in Ukraine, providing advice. We are consulting universities, student contractors in the process of providing for the welfare and safety of our students. A control room has been set up in MEA. Now this control room has been functional for the past 7 or 8 days, but we have seriously augmented the strength. We have over 20 officers that are manning these control rooms, this control room in the Ministry of External Affairs on a 24/7 basis. Just to give an example, till now and just today, we have answered 980 calls and dealt with some 850 emails that were sent to this control room.
All right, that was Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla there addressing the media on exactly what we were talking about on the steps that India is taking to evacuate citizens from this conflict zone. But let me come back to the bigger question. Nitin Pai, what do we see happening in the next 24 to 48 hours? If I were to look at it as a game of brinksmanship, Putin has made it clear he doesn't care much about sanctions. We have to wait and see what Mr. Biden does. But what really can happen next? Do you think Putin will stop here and say that, listen, let's go back to what I really want is an assurance that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. Let's come back to that red line and negotiate from that power of strength. Or do you think he will go on further into Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it's hard to determine what the man wants to do. But I can tell you that there's one thing which I don't think should happen, and I wish doesn't happen, and another thing which is most likely to happen. What I don't want to happen is for this to become a conflict between the Russians and NATO, because and that there's a very high risk that it can happen. Not because of intent, but because of accident. When armed forces are so close to each other, an accident in terms of a misdirected missile or a misdirected artillery shell can set off things that can quickly get out of control. And we're talking about nuclear powers here who have systems who've been put in place for the last 60 years in order to do nasty things to each other. And the rest of the world can't be immune from what happens. So let's hope that the conflict remains contained in the Ukraine, in Ukraine and that region. What is more likely to happen, if we can avoid this risky thing, is that great powers always find it very easy to do shock and awe and go and take down a weaker power. For the Russian armed forces to take out the Ukrainians, it's not a big deal. So there's a lot of firepower is employed, a lot of technology is employed, and as Mr. Bagga said, it's probably a matter of days before the Russians can achieve or declare victory. But the challenge is what happens after that. You're not talking about a small place. You're talking about a well-developed culture, a country which has a very strong sense of its own identity, shares borders with countries like Poland, with Estonia, has access to the sea, and has the support of very strong actors like NATO and the United States, Turkey, and everybody else. So it's easy for external actors to support the Ukrainians in order to put up a resistance and an insurgency against Russian forces. So the worst nightmare for Russia is not so much that the NATO is along its borders, but the fact that they can get dragged into an insurgency for years to come in Ukraine. And this depends entirely on the Ukrainian people, the kind of fighting spirit that they have, the amount of motivation they have to put up a resistance against the Russians, against the Russian occupation, the amount of goodwill that they have with their neighbors. And you can rest assured that there are a lot of external actors who will want to go in and intervene and provide assistance, all the kind of assistance that the Ukrainians require in order to fight the Russians. So what happened in Afghanistan in the 80s can very well happen to the Russians in Ukraine in the 2022s.
Earlier in this show, there was a reference to America's action in Afghanistan and how that has sort of, in a sense, laid the stage for what's happening today. And Mr. Sarna, I want to get your take on that. That the kind of shoddy, messy withdrawal of American troops in Afghanistan and the Taliban then taking over in a blink of an eye has, in a sense, emboldened forces to say that America is not going to get its troops on the ground. That's a red line for the Democrats. And that is an envelope we can push?
Well, I think perhaps Afghanistan and Ukraine are not entirely analogous. But what does come out is what is perceived as the US sort of withdrawing from the world in many ways, some of which started under Trump. And Mr. Biden has, while saying that the US is back and the US is going to be there, playing the diplomatic game and holding up the world order, he's also made it clear that he doesn't want to get the boots dirty. In that sense, he doesn't want to be fighting wars which he doesn't need to. And that was his reasoning for pulling out of Afghanistan, that this war has got us nowhere for 20 years, and I'm going home because, they have to handle it. So certainly that has given a signal that beyond a point, people are going to have to fight their own battles. And people, there's going to be diplomatic support, there's going to be international support. But yes, that kind of overarching, the Cold War mentality of, A versus B, and this is our sphere of influence, and we are going to guard it, and we are going to go with it to the last man. I don't think the world is any longer at that place. Where our countries have become inward-looking, they have become, disengaged in many ways. So perhaps, Putin's action is part of this whole, the geopolitical chessboard being shaken up, and these things being seen as coming within the realm of the possible.
That's, I think, the big takeaway that we need to watch out for. And frankly, we saw glimpses of that in how the world dealt with the pandemic as well, where each country was talking about how they would stockpile vaccines for themselves first. Are we in a geopolitical situation of each person for themselves? We'll have to wait and see. The next few hours will be extremely crucial. I want to thank all of you for taking out the time and explaining to us what really we're seeing here, what happens next. We'll take a very short break on the India development debate, but